everyone, and welcome you to our next iteration of our congressional conversations. And so we are going to chat about the ever evolving scenario around infrastructure and the next huge spending bill coming down the pike on Capitol Hill. Ensure everyone who is watching today and listening knows exactly what they can do this week and next week as members are back home in the district and they need to hear from you. So I am so thrilled to be joined by my colleague, Thomas Fletcher. He is Americans for Prosperity's Deputy Director of Federal Affairs, and he really complements what we all do as grassroots activists in the states. We're on the front lines. He is on the front lines in the thick of things in DC. So I'm going to turn it over to him shortly. But first, I am so thrilled to introduce today's guest. Congressman Glenn Thompson serves Pennsylvania's 15th congressional district. It includes parts of 14 counties. I think it's the second largest district geographically in this Commonwealth. He serves as the ranking member of the Agriculture Committee and also serves as a senior member of the Education and Labor Committee. So we are so lucky to have him as a member of our delegation because he consistently focuses on the need for more of our hard-earned money to be kept in our pocketbooks and away from Washington. In 2019, he joined us for a fantastic roundtable to discuss some of the benefits of Americans of all backgrounds, the benefits they were receiving from the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. And we talked about the need to make some of those pro-growth components of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act permanent and oppose any tax increases or tax proposals that were not growth-oriented. But Congressman, the conversation seems to have taken a pretty sharp turn. President Biden, Leader Schumer, Speaker Pelosi are talking about raising over $2 trillion in new taxes. We know these increases would hurt workers' wages, they would crush small businesses, and they would not even come close to paying for the massive spending that the president is proposing. So welcome, Congressman. Shed some light on what you're hearing, what you're seeing around this conversation in Washington for a so-called infrastructure proposal that totals $4 trillion.
Well, Ashley, thank you so much. Thanks for the opportunity to be able to do this and to share on Facebook Live. And just thank you what Americans for Prosperity do each and every day as an organization. I mean, you're such a great partner, and a great partner for me as I lead as the Republican leader of the U.S. House Agriculture Committee, which is more than the food we eat. That's important. It's about the rural economy. And so I think what you all do complements well what my goals are to restore a robust rural economy, to get that economic engine ignited, to get back to what we were seeing back in 2019, even as late as February, March of 2020, when this pandemic hit. Our country, as you have said, has taken a dramatic U-turn. And by U-turn, I mean that's an ultra-socialist turn towards reversing, not just reversing what was the strongest economy I know in my lifetime, where we saw the lowest level of unemployment, we saw economic prosperity, we saw people's savings, investments, retirements that were booming, wages going up for the first time in over a decade, and especially for those at the lowest level of the wage scale, all driven by just good, sound policy, not bigger government, actually less government, and and the tax cuts, the Jobs Act and the tax cut that we were proud to pass, that President Trump signed, and so now it is a strong ultra socialist U-turn, because now the proposal is on the table for, President Biden wants to raise capital gains tax, raise the inheritance tax, increase the basis for taxing. Um, the amount of spending has just been atrocious, um, and very transparent, that it's not really um, it's not what they say it's going to be. Now, you referenced the transportation bill. What they put forward, $2.3 trillion dollars, not billion, but $1 trillion of additional spending is anything but transportation. 94% of that bill uh, has nothing to do with roads and highways and bridges. It's an agenda. It's a liberal socialist agenda. It's kind of packaged within the framework of the name, the title of infrastructure, but it's the anything but infrastructure bill.
Congressman, I'm glad you mentioned that, because I think there seems to be a breakdown in terms of what infrastructure actually means. One of the things that we're worried about, one of the issues that we've really worked on over the past couple of years is the ProAct, which I know you oppose. You're very vocal about it over the last two Congresses. And how worried are you that things that have absolutely nothing to do with infrastructure, like the ProAct, could end up in a large $1 trillion, spending package, frankly?
Well, you only need to point to the first bill that came out of the chute, Thomas, and that was the budget reconciliation bill that was supposed to be about COVID, right? But there was a tiny amount that had anything to do with COVID, and the rest of it was just a liberal bill designed to transition our nation. And unfortunately, they were able to use budget reconciliation, which means it was enacted. It became law, and some parts of that are just so egregious. I point to something just in the agriculture space had to do with socially disadvantaged farmers. And there is a record of individuals, perhaps, well, not perhaps, it's been documented that worked within the USDA that quite frankly, they were terrible individuals. But they were lone wolves. It wasn't the USDA itself, but these individuals really did discriminate. A lot of that happened down south, very targeted. But and that's unacceptable, absolutely unacceptable. But what the Democrats put into this massive, $2 trillion spending bill right out of the gate after we were sworn in on January 3rd, this would make anyone of 5 different ethnic origins, and you don't have to be a citizen, by the way. So this is for non-citizens. If you happen to be a farmer or rancher and you have one of these 5 ethnic origins, and you have a loan through USDA, or maybe a loan that's guaranteed from but you get it through your community bank or farm credit or credit union, the government will reimburse you at a rate of 120%. So do the math. They pay off your bill and they give you a check for 20% more. And there's no requirement to show that you were ever discriminated against. Now, I just offer that because it's an example of the type of really abusive type programs that are being put forward. It's about, most of these bills are not about like the infrastructure bill is not about infrastructure. It's about social engineering. It's about it's more about social policies that they've infused under this umbrella of infrastructure. And shame on the Democrats for doing that. I mean, they must think that we're pretty naive in terms of the American citizens, that they can pull the wool over our eyes, so to speak, and allow these things to happen. So I'm, for example, with the ProAct, absolutely opposed to that. It's just a gift to unions, and quite frankly, most of them remaining unions today are largely public sector. These folks that have the privilege and the opportunity, as I do, to be able to work and to serve the people. That's a tremendous responsibility. But the ProAct would just, it takes away employer rights. It doesn't, it just makes the whole process of negotiations, of coming to the table, just a tremendously unfair advantage. And that's something that should be balanced, obviously. And so there is concern that obviously, and I think currently, even though we're down to about a 3-person variance in the House right now, although the Democrats did win a special election in New Mexico. It was expected, huge Democratic congressional district. So maybe 4 once that person's sworn in. But it's a very narrow margin. But with that, they probably will be able to pass, as they did, things like the ProAct out of the House. At least at this point, thankfully, because of a couple moderate remaining senators, primarily ones from West Virginia and Nevada. They have not been willing to let go of the cloture rule that requires 60 votes. And I think I'm hoping that will be a firewall to protect us from those types of very damaging big government um, pieces of legislation that sadly the Democrats have been passing out of the House.
No, we appreciate that, Congressman. And look, we can promise you and guarantee our activists across the nation are engaged right now. They understand the gravity of trillions of dollars. They get it. They know they're going to feel that, whether that's through the increasing prices that we're paying at the grocery store or at the fuel pump. It is going to be felt. Folks can't afford much more. And so they are engaged. We want all of you to take a moment to visit stopthespendingspree.com, sign that letter. It's going to go to your member of Congress and your 2 United States senators, and it is going to urge their no vote on this so-called infrastructure proposal. It is just so critical that you scale your voice. These men and women are home. They are in the district this week and next week. And so go visit a district office, link up with your Americans for Prosperity chapter. We have chapters across 35 states. And so we're willing to accompany you to those meetings if you'd like. We have a fantastic one-pager that we are giving these members so they understand exactly why this would be so toxic. Congressman, we are going to be visiting some members in swing districts across the nation over the coming weeks. We visited a few already. I know next Tuesday here in Pennsylvania, we're going to be in Congressman Connor Lamb's district doing a big rally, a Stop the Spending Spree rally. Do you think that pressure from folks in these districts can make a difference? We know that your speaker wants to run something, before Independence Day, before the 4th of July. So what sort of impact, how important is it that the grassroots are engaged between now and the 4th?
Actually, it's incredibly important. I mean, this our our constitutional republic only works well when the duly elected representatives hear from their constituents. I like. I'll be honest with you. My success that I've had in Congress now, and this is my 13th year serving. As you said, I'm a senior member on Education and Labor and a Republican leader of the House Agriculture Committee. My success has been what I call homegrown solutions. And that's based on input from the people that I represent and serve. I am their voice and I am their vote. And so I think it's important. I think that I wouldn't even call it pressure. I mean, I think it's a duly constitutional responsibility that citizens have. And it's so important part of the Constitution. It's in the main body. It wasn't an afterthought with the Bill of Rights, and that is the right to petition Congress. And that is to bring your needs, your issues, your perspectives, and yes, your solutions. So when I sit down and talk with people, I listen intently. I believe in using what God's given me, and that's 2 ears and 1 mouth. So I try to listen at least twice as much as what I speak. But at the same time, I put an expectation on those folks who come to see me. I want to know what their ideas are, because they're living the consequences of public policy. And sometimes that's positive and that's great. And we love those stories. But a lot of times there's a lot of unintended consequences that have a negative impact on our rights, our freedoms, our economic prosperity. And so the people that are living through that, I think, are in the best position to be able to tell me what their ideas are. And I call that homegrown solutions, actually.
I
And I'm
love that. I
I'm
love
proud
that.
to say there's a lot of homegrown solutions that I've taken back to Washington in many different forms, and I've incorporated into legislation, and it's benefiting businesses and families and citizens, not just in my congressional district, but across the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania and across the nation. So I think it is incredibly important role, to come out, and to be civil. Sometimes there's some folks on the other side that don't know how to do that. I think most folks that you're communicating with know exactly how to do that. Yeah, and to communicate their ideas and to communicate why it's so important, their perspective with all members. That's an important role, and I appreciate that.
Yeah, Congressman, you mentioned that you've been there for 13 years. And looking back during that time, have you ever seen higher stakes than what we see right now in terms of the direction of the country and really what people, how important it is for people to be expressing themselves to their elected officials like you and others and your colleagues? Talk about that for a second in terms of what the stakes are right now.
I think the stakes are dire. Thomas, I have to tell you that when I was first elected in 2008, sworn in 2009, and no sci-fi perspective could I imagine what what the Democratic Party in Washington is advancing and pushing, and some of it successfully, like I talked about that Budget Reconciliation Act, the things that were packed into that could not be stopped. I think that so it's scary. It's very scary, and it's transformational with the nation. Now, I will tell you though, despite whatever is accomplished, and we're going to have another election in next year, 2022, and I'm fairly confident we're going to restore some checks and balances on the administration, with the House, anyways, and potentially with the Senate. But I also believe in the resiliency of this country. That the things that were, and Ashley, you've made reference to it, the inflation that we're seeing today. Gasoline, $3. I mean, a reasonable price around here is like $3, anywhere from $3.15 to $3.19 a gallon, and it's much higher than that in other parts of the country. And the cost of, and we just came off of a period of time of the greatest energy independence and most affordable fuel costs in history. So it shows you the wrong person in office with bad policies, what can happen. And energy costs impacts transportation of everything. So it's going to drive up the cost of anything we buy. Is going to be a higher cost, starting with our food, because of the transportation that is involved. And so fuel costs, energy costs, there's a lot of things that we're struggling with right now as a nation, and we can turn those things around, but it starts with just insisting on good common sense policy. And it doesn't take a lot of creativity, because we just need to do what we did for 4 years, but let's say 3 years before COVID sort of threw a wrench in our economy. If we could replicate that again, and I think that's the kind of thing you could do overnight, how much better off the families of America would be.
No, we so appreciate that, Congressman. Again, I want to direct everyone to stopthespendingspree.com, sign and share that letter. The next 2 weeks are so critical. As these men and women are at home, they need to hear from you. Congressman, we're making patch through calls into so many members' offices every single day. We have activists and staff alike on the phone lines. As I mentioned, we're doing rallies in certain districts. And so I would really value your perspective on timing here. When do you see, what are you hearing with respect to a vote? Is that still all up in the air and unknown? I know folks are asking that. And so any insight you can shed, we are grateful for.
Well, the timing is now. The timing is now. The process is in place. We've already seen, the Budget Reconciliation Act. We've seen a transportation bill that's been introduced. We saw President Biden's budget boondoggle that was just released. $6 trillion, more than doubling what we normally annually spend. And within that budget, it pretty much attacks anything under Homeland Security, attacks our military, reduces our military. Safety and security is, I always believed, I still believe that it's the first and foremost responsibility of anyone serving in government is safety and security as basically an essential responsibility. And yet those are the things, despite more than doubling his proposal to more than double the annual spending on top of all the debt that's been accrued um, previously, he actually cuts the things that would would attack our safety in terms of from our military to defunding our police. And so the time is now to be able to weigh in, to share a well articulated perspective. And trust me, it makes a difference. I mean, members do track, and more importantly, sometimes the staff will track the number of contacts. The suggestion I would use is sign on to the letter, use the facts that you're able to provide them. But then I encourage everybody to put their own face on to tell their story. Now, how does this impact you wherever you're at in your lifetime? Maybe you're a person that's just coming out of, you know, out of college or out of high school, and you're into the workforce, or you're preparing your education. I mean, all that debt's going to be on your shoulders in the future.
Absolutely.
Maybe you're someone who's led a well-lived, hard-worked life, and maybe you're retired or approaching retired years. That's going to impact, those costs are going to impact those folks as they go into retirement years, and plus the importance of the impact on their children, and as now as a grandfather, I can tell you, and more importantly, their grandchildren, of what they're going to face, and everybody in between. But to put a face on this and to tell a story, make it personal, as you're sharing the facts, the great information that you'll receive.
Well, Congressman, thank you for that. You echo some of the things your colleagues from the PA delegation have shared with our activists over the past few months. Congressman Keller, Congressman Muser, they've shared similar sentiments that they look at those contacts, they read those stories, or conversely listen to them when folks call into the office. And so we really want to urge folks to take advantage of this opportunity. We're at a critical crossroads. And so we need you to help us and scale your voice in the conversation. You know, your congressman, probably similar to Congressman Thompson, is on all the things: Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube. And so follow your member there, see what they're doing and talking about. You know, you have district offices in Bellefonte, Ebensburg, and Oil City. And I know your team is prepared to take those calls that folks are putting into your office about their opinion on this out of control spending. We have an opportunity. You heard the congressman talk about that razor thin margin in both chambers. And so we really can make a difference. There are members who are on the fence. We know Congressman Thompson is totally opposed to these kind of huge, massive spending bills, but there are members that are on the fence. And so those are the folks that particularly need to hear from you. Again, stopthespendingspree.com. Congressman, I want to give you the last word, but we are so grateful for your time, and welcome back to the district.
Ashley, thank you so much. It's great to be actually. I'm normally roaming the district. I'm sitting in my backyard for this.
It
call.
looks idyllic. It looks
Yeah,
idyllic.
It's like therapy when I get a chance to sit here. So thanks for the opportunity. Actually, the other thing I would add to all this is it's not just about opposing. We have to show what we're for, and there are some great, I think, conservative, targeted proposals that we've put forward that really address the issues of our time, but it's not huge, massive trillions of dollars spending. And it's, and I'll just throw a couple of those out there very quickly. The whole climate debacle that, the other side, the new Green Deal, a lot of the spending we see in these proposals are focused on climate, but none of it's science-based, right? All of it would hurt the economy. And and so we put forward in the Agriculture Committee, the House Republicans, we put forward conservative climate solutions, and we have a series of 5 bills that we put forward. It's great pieces of legislation. It really mobilizes what we've already been using, what we know works. The fact is, because of these programs, land-based solutions, which includes agriculture and forestry, takes 6 gigatons of carbon out of the air every year. And so if you're concerned about greenhouse gases, we've got the solution, and it doesn't require bigger government and tremendously more spending to be able to do it. Same thing when it comes to infrastructure. And one of the most important things we need in infrastructure today is rural broadband. We need that connectivity. We need to fill in the digital divide. And the House Republicans and the Agriculture Committee has put together a America Rural Broadband bill that's very reasonable. I mean, it over 2 years, and this would go so far of ending the digital divide. It's just basically a little over $7 billion, not $1 trillion. And it doesn't create new infrastructure because it would utilize USDA and their experience and their personnel, and it would actually get us to where we need to be economically, and give rural America a fair fight when it comes to economic prosperity, when it comes to connectivity. But again, these are conservative, they're targeted, they're laser focused on the problem, but they're not expensive. So my point being is we need to stand against these massive bills, but we ought to let folks know that there is great pieces of legislation that are out there that would be very, very effective and make a difference in the lives of American families. But at the same time, they're not going to bankrupt our nation and bankrupt our citizens.
Congressman, thank you so much. I'm totally going to use that homegrown ideas line. I love that. I think that is so fantastic. And so we're just so grateful for all you do. If there is anything we can do for you, as always, you know where to get us, but we just appreciate it. Keep up the fight. We've got your back. And so folks, visit stopthespendingspree.com, sign and share that letter. We look forward to seeing you across districts, across all 35 AFP chapters in the coming weeks as we mobilize activists to make certain their members know another multi-trillion-dollar spending bill will not be swallowed easily by Americans. So thank you all, Thomas, Congressman, thank you gentlemen so much for joining us.
Thank you. Appreciate the opportunity.
Have a good day.
Take care.